Greetings, everyone. This is Richard Solomon with an incredible episode of Taking Care of Business. On September 2nd, 1945, the Japanese government and the Japanese Imperial General Headquarters surrendered to the American Armed Forces in Tokyo Bay. Now, with me is someone who actually printed the instrument of surrender. I'm actually in an undisclosed location in New York, and I'm actually holding a draft copy of the instruments of surrender, and it's quite a document. It says, Instrument of Surrender of the Japanese Government to the Supreme Commander of the Allied Powers at Tokyo Bay, Japan on 2 September 1945. It's written partially in Japanese, and it has the following language. By the grace of heaven, Emperor of Japan, seated on the throne, occupied by the same dynasty, changeless through ages eternal, to all of whom these presents shall come greeting. We do hereby authorize, it's a Japanese name, Yoshihiro Umetsu Zosanami, First Class of the Imperial Order of the Rising Sun, Second Class of the Imperial Military Order of the Golden Kite, to attach his signature by command and in behalf of ourselves and our Imperial General Headquarters unto the instrument of surrender, which is required by the Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers to be signed. And it's witnessed and has a signature and some official places for seals. So you are Milton Pike. You're from Brooklyn. So how does a boy from Brooklyn, when were you born?
I was born in 1921, March 11th.
All right. So how does a boy from Brooklyn end up with the one of the most important documents of the 1900s, to be a part of that? You want to start from the beginning? You were born in Brooklyn.
Well, I was born in Brooklyn. My parents were both Americans, and they were also born in Brooklyn. And as I say, I grew up. I went to kindergarten, junior high, and
high school.
High school there.
Right. Samuel J. Tilden?
J. Tilden was the high school I got in. When I got out of Samuel J. Tilden, I took a few night courses at New York.
New York Tech?
New York University.
Oh, NYU. There you go.
Yes. And from then on, I got a job in New York with one of the big lithographic firms called Lutz and Schenkman. There were very few lithographic firms at that particular time, and that was my basis and background and my training. After that, I went to work for Washington, D.C., in which I took a lot of tests, ended up in Army Map Service, and Army Map Service was a G2 operation, top secret operation in Del Colly, Maryland. It was built underground, and we were one of the first ones that were doing aerial photography, and because we knew we were about to go into World War II. At that particular time, we were doing photographic and aerial map making of every area outside of the United States, because we knew that we were going to be involved in World War II. However, I had a deferment because of the job I was doing there for 2 years, and after that they drafted me into the infantry at Camp Fannin, which was in Texas. In Camp Fannin, because of my background, I was teaching map reading. At that particular time, I was the only one outside of my outfit that was not sent across to fight in Germany. And after a period of time, they sent me over to Fort Knox, Kentucky for training in the Tank Corps because they needed every able-bodied person to be fighting the war. After my training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, I was sent to California to go overseas to fight in all the Japanese-held islands in the Tank Corps. But fortunately for me, because of my background, I was taken out and with the 29th Engineers, and we went overseas to fight, to do all the printing of the invasion maps for Japan, which I did for a year or so. I stood in the Philippines for 1 year and 3 months. And we were doing all the invasion maps and all the interesting information for the invasion of Japan, which was top secret. At that particular time, we were under the auspices of the U.S. government in Washington, D.C., and not under MacArthur's command. However, after they dropped the nuclear bomb, which was about 10 months later, they had no need for us to do any more invasion maps, and we started to do the war crimes trials. And the war crimes trials involved all the secret documents and the testimony of all the Japanese generals and service people, and also the surrender documents, which we were doing all the reproductions of. So I have some of this information. I have quite a number of pictures, of course, of my time in the Philippines, and I traveled from Baguio all the way down to Batangas, and I have many pictures of what was going on in the destruction of the island of Luzon.
All right. So this is a fascinating story. So we're going to now get into some detail. Okay. But before we get into some of the detail, so did you actually learn how to drive a tank and operate it?
Yes, I did. I drove 3 different tanks that they took me on. I can't remember the names of them all. I guess they were Pershing and Grant and other tank, small, medium, and large tanks at that particular time.
Now, were you the driver or were you the gunner? What were you?
You had to know all the positions. You had to be able to. You had to be able to learn the machine gun on it, the 75 millimeter cannon on it. You had to learn how to change the tracks on it in case they fell off. You had to do everything in a tank at Fort Knox.
Now, your printing skills is what ultimately led to some of the map making, the cartography, and the surrender documents.
Yes.
All right. So how did they balance the need for you to be a warrior versus the need for you to be, I guess, someone who's going to add to the archival history of the world?
Well, it was much more important to have people who had a background in printing and reproduction than it was to be a person who was in the battlefield.
Well, it's different. You were in a different kind of battlefield.
Yes.
Right. So when you first started out, go ahead.
I forget what I was.
When you first started out printing, where were you stationed when you first did the first printing you did?
Well, the first time first time I did printing was when I was in PS 61, and I was president of the printing club over there for quite a while, and it was very interesting because I did a lot of linoleum carvings. I learned how to I used to do the typesetting and print on the flattened press, small flattened press. And from then on, of course, I was interested in being in the printing industry And fortunately, I got myself a job as a errand boy at Lutz and Shankman in New York City, and was able to get to know all the principles of at that time, which they call modern lithography.
Right, that was like typesetting and...
No, that was not typesetting. That was printing from Bavarian limestone, taking the prints from it and reproducing it on what they called an offset press at that time, in which we used zinc plates and put the image on it. And as you know, lithography is the process, a planographic process that prints from water and ink. And the water repels the ink that goes over it. And you're able to use zinc plates to wrap around the cylinder, and that would offset onto a rubber blanket and in time offset onto a printed piece of paper.
So once you became an expert in the world of printing and lithography, how did the United States military harness that knowledge?
Well, when I applied for a job down in Washington, D.C., they told me about an outfit that was opening up in Del Collier, Maryland, and had a great need for people with a background in lithography. And they took me on at the highest pay level that they could get at that particular time. And I was put in charge of the plate making area, in which we produced the invasion maps for many of the countries we were doing that. From that particular point, as I said, I got a deferment for 2 years because of the type of work we were doing, which was more important than being on the battlefront.
So when you printed up the battle maps, what were they? What they look like? Because, in some ways they need to be small, and in some ways they need to be large. So how did they figure out what a person in the middle of a battle would need as far as a map, and how they would use that? Because now everything is much different with GPS and smartphones and satellite phones. But what did they use? What was the state of technology and thinking in those days?
The technology at that time is that we used what they call aerial metrogon cameras. We had 5 planes. 5 planes flying about 7,000 feet up, and these planes would take stereoscopic photos because of the type of cameras that they use. And these photographs were then assembled at Army Map Service in what they call a triangulation. The triangulation of these maps occurred when you had spies go into the particular area of invasion and triangulate a triangular area that was measured by very accurately from point to point, and the aerial maps were pinpointed in that particular area. And because they were stereoscopic, you not only could tell, but have an accurate distance, but you could also have the heights of many things, so you could use them to fire over, or the invasion of our troops would be able to go into that particular country and be able to fire their mortars or any kinds of guns over any heights or areas that were encompassed by it.
All right. So you took pictures and you put them into maps? Is that what you did?
That's correct.
So you had to translate photos, which are one dimension, like more like 3D, into something that's almost two-dimensional.
That was not my job. At the time, my job was making the plates that had all this information on them. The other part of the job was compiled by the people who worked in Army Map Service, who combined all the information they could get. Even photographs that were taken by tourists of old trails and everything in that particular area was incorporated in these particular maps.
Now, you said the place was secret.
That was a top secret organization, and it was a Q2 operation. You had to have complete clearance to be involved in it.
So I assume that you weren't allowed to walk in with a briefcase or walk out with a briefcase.
That's true. We didn't catch too many spies, but they did get a few at that particular time.
Oh, they did. There were some spies.
Yes.
And how did they find them?
I don't know.
Okay, but where's Joe? Oh, he's gone. Like that.
Yes.
So what was the security like? Was it, how did they arrange for security to bring both the information in and to keep it? Were there vaults? Was it all underground? Was it multiple walls?
Well, it was all underground. And of course, the Army map consisted of not only the Army itself, but also of civilian help. Where did they keep the maps? I don't know.
Did armored cars take the material after it was printed out to some other location?
I don't know how they transferred them.
Okay. And this was in Maryland?
That was in Maryland. That was in Del Carty, Maryland. That outfit is now shut down because all the reproduction outfits between the Air Force, the Navy, and the Army have all been combined into one situation now. And, of course, aerial maps now are done by high-flying planes who can capture all this information without
not a problem.
Without any problems.
Where did you live? You lived in Maryland?
I lived in Washington, D.C. at that time.
And then there was no metro then. How did you commute?
Commuted by car. We usually had a group of people who worked for the same organization would pick us all up, and we all chipped in and paid to get the gas and everything else to drive down to Del Carty from Washington.
Wow! And what was in the minute we have left for this segment? What was it like back then? Because D.C. is very different now.
Well, Washington was a very cosmopolitan area. A lot of young people working down there, and all the different offices that was contained in Washington government office.
Yeah. All right, this is Richard Solomon. This is our first segment. We'll be right back. We're talking with World War II veteran and I guess archivist and historian as well, Milton Pike. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, Richard Solomon. I'm with Milton Pike, and we're discussing his career in World War II as a printer, lithographer, map maker, and we're sitting down and I'm looking at just a fascinating document, and this is the Instrument of Surrender, September 2, 1945, and just to read another page from the document, proclamation. Accepting the terms set forth in declaration issued by the heads of the governments of the United States, Great Britain, and China on July 26, 1945 at Potsdam, and subsequently adhered to by the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, we have commanded the Japanese Imperial Government and the Japanese Imperial General Headquarters to sign on our behalf the Instrument of Surrender presented by the Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, and to issue general orders to the military and naval forces in accordance with the direction of the Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers. And it's signed by Hirohito and countersigned by the Prime Minister of Japan, and that contains the seal of the Emperor. So,
it's not Hirohito's signature.
Well, it says signed.
The only one. Yes.
Well, it was supposed to be signed by him.
Yes.
Right. All right. So going back to the original document that you received, you got from where?
The original document that I received, I got from MacArthur's headquarters, which was on the battleship Missouri. And we were supposed to reproduce, as I say, 10 of them to give to the generals that were at the signing ceremony. Hirohito's signature is not on this document because it had to go back to Japan for him to put his original document on. But this is an exact copy as far as size and the quality of paper that it went on.
How did you print this? Because in terms of size and quality of paper and all that stuff.
This is printed by offset printing, which was known as modern lithography at that particular time.
So who created the original document? Do you know?
I have absolutely no idea who created it. I imagine it was created by MacArthur's staff.
Now, how did you get the copy? Did just somebody, on a motorcycle come by and said, Mac wants you to have this?
No, well, I was at that particular time at the top line of people running the 29th Engineers 2771st reproduction outfit, which was the biggest reproduction outfit in all of the Orient at that particular time.
Wait, but how was? But in all seriousness, how was it delivered? Did it come by armored car? Did it come?
I have absolutely no idea.
All right. But you did get the original.
We did get the original that was copied from.
Right. Did you get one original or more?
No, there was only one original. That was it.
Okay. So
these are copies of the original.
Okay. So you made the copies, and then do you remember what happened to the original?
The original went to Hirohito in Japan to sign, and that went to the Library of Congress, I imagine, right. And it's still there.
Now, when you had the possession of the original, was it under armed guard or anything like that?
No.
No?
The place, no.
It meant like a special armed guard just for the document.
29th Engineers was a battalion strength headquarters during the war and after the war after they dropped the bomb was over. And that was a contained area in the Philippines.
Right, that you were in charge of.
Yeah.
Now, you also had to do invasion maps you were talking about.
Well, the invasion maps were all printed when I first arrived in the Philippines. Our first job, when we got there within 24 hours of our ship landing, which was the Azalea City, we set up one press and we printed up thousands of surrender documents that we dropped on all the Japanese-held islands, and which resulted in a lot of Japanese soldiers surrendering based on the surrender documents that were dropped on them, which I have copies of, by the way.
All right. I want to talk about that. What was this? Was this to tell them to surrender because they've already lost?
The surrender documents were printed in Tagalog. They were printed in Japanese, and they were printed in English, asking them to hold up this surrender document and go to any area that was occupied by the American soldiers.
Right. And what was that? Just so they could formally surrender in person and surrender their own? At this point, was the war over, or just the battles were closing and they were doing poorly?
Well, as you know, there was a lot of the Japanese didn't surrender for quite a long time, even after the surrender was official.
Right, because I guess they didn't really have the way to communicate or learn that the war was over.
Yes, don't forget the Japanese were all over the islands and hidden in many other places. Right.
So your job, you printed up the I guess the notice that the war was over and to surrender, and then that was dropped from airplanes.
Yes.
Okay. And you printed up thousands of those so that it would get all over the place?
Yeah, they was dropped on all the Japanese-held areas.
Now, the documents were written in the three languages on one piece of paper, or were they separate pieces of paper in each language?
No, they were all written on one piece of paper. I have copies of it. I don't have it in front of me right now.
Now, do you remember, was it signed by anybody, like the emperor or somebody, to give them what, like how would someone who received it know that it was authentic?
I would have to look at the...
All right, so you'll do, after the break, we'll take a look at that. Now, the actual invasion maps, you worked on those too?
Yes.
Okay. So were those invasion of islands and of the mainland of Japan?
They were made of all the places we intended to invade in World War II, right. Of course, in the Pacific area.
Now, were the maps just maps, or they were actually road maps on, go here and go north, keep going until you hit the headquarters?
They contained trails, maps, the contour of the land, and everything that would be important for any outfit that was going up against the Japanese.
Did you work with any frontline soldiers to show the maps to see if they were user friendly?
No.
Oh, so how do you know that the maps were effective to the end user as someone who was creating the product?
Well, all our maps went out to all the outfits that were going to invade in landing craft or any other way they could get to the particular areas that we were invading.
Wow. Now, when the war was over, how much more post-war material did you work on?
After the war was over, naturally, it was not necessary to print any more maps, so we started to do the war trials, and we did copies of all the diaries and all the photographs of all the atrocities that the Japanese did while we were at war that they had accumulated.
Right. Now, so everybody seems to know these questions and answers. Do you remember the day you were drafted? What was the draft date?
I don't remember.
Well, it was what year?
1942.
Okay. And what was your date of discharge? Or year of discharge? Was it?
I have to look at my discharge papers.
Was it like 45 or 46? Like, how much after the war was over were you still in the U.S. military?
After the war was over, I would imagine it was about 2 months because everybody wanted to go home.
Right. And then, so when the war was over and you were discharged, where did you go home to? Brooklyn?
I went home to Brooklyn.
Right. Did a lot change when you came back?
Yes.
Did you change a lot yourself?
I would think so.
Yeah. Did you, in all the subsequent years, did you ever meet any of the people that you were in the United States Armed Forces with?
Occasionally, yes. I met up with some of the people that were with me in the 29th, and we did that together, but after a while, those communities started to fall apart. We were all starting to get pretty old and go on with our own lives.
Now, have you been to any of the museums, either like the things involving World War II or the National Archives, to kind of see some of the stuff that you lived through?
I don't remember if I have, but I imagine that I did.
Right. Am I the only one to interview you about all of this really important history that you were involved in?
Yes.
Wow. We have to make sure we get copies of this to everybody. You have extensive photos. You have photos, you have documents, just from a global view. Can you tell me what you have pictures of? Because I want the people who are listening to this to be able to see with their mind what we're looking at.
The pictures are mainly of the destruction of the the areas I visited in the Philippines. There are pictures of the people and the way they lived. There are pictures of my unit and my friends, and I have copies of my book showing everybody that was in the reproduction team of the 2771st that did all of this work, and all the invasion maps and the photographs that have been compiled by me.
Now, while the war was progressing, did you have an idea more than the average soldier that we were either winning or the bomb was coming, or were you like everyone else, just sort of you found out when it happened?
Most of it was conjecture. We knew what was going on. We got adequate information constantly of our progress within the war. And in a way, it was really quite kept up to date with the knowledge that we were able to get.
Now, your final rank was sergeant?
My final rank, I ended up as a staff sergeant, even though they wanted me to stay on and get an officer's rating if I would stay on and keep the reproduction area running. But since there were not too many people who had a good background in officer lithography in that particular area, and most of the men wanted to go home because they were homesick, and the people that decided that they were going to stay on with me eventually got homesick and left. And it was too big a job for any one person to try and put together again.
So did you lived in the Philippines for a while?
I lived in the 29th Engineer area.
Right. What was it like living there, in terms of either food or climate or conditions?
Well, originally when we got there, of course, it's just what you would expect. You went to sleep on the ground. You had K ration and C ration, and you had dried up eggs and moldy bread, and you had just enough to get by with. But things improved little by little. With about a month in between, after we finished sleeping on the ground, they built us platforms to sleep on. Then they put tents up on the platform. They kept about 10 men in the tent. Then we got cots to sleep on, and then we got good rations, and we had a cooked tent to eat in, and things changed materially.
How did you communicate with the people back home, and how did you do so?
We communicated by letter most of the time.
No phone, right?
No phone at that time.
And how long would it take a letter to be sent by you to get home, more or less, and how long would it take to get a response?
I would imagine that at least a letter would take about a month to get home and a month to get to me.
Wow. So if you had big news, it would be like almost 2 months before the round trip of news made the circuit.
Yes.
Right. Did your parents know that you were safe while you were away?
Yes, they got letters from me constantly where I was.
Right. Now, you also had a brother in the war too. Did you have other family members?
I didn't have any brother in the war.
Oh, who was in the war of your family other than you?
My cousins.
Right.
Were in the war, but the rest, my three of my brothers were not in the war. One was working for a big outfit doing telescopes in New Jersey. The other one was in college, and the other one was too young to be in the war.
So do you also have sort of an affinity for photography because it goes with lithography and printing?
Yes, I do. I use a camera an awful lot.
What kind of equipment did you have in the Philippines or when you were involved in all that you were. And how did you develop all that stuff and get film?
I was with a reproduction outfit. We had very large reproduction cameras. There were two of them to reproduce all the work we needed. We also had aerial cameras that our people from the 29th would go up and take aerial pictures and pictures of the surrounding area. And a lot of those pictures were given to me, where I made prints of. I myself had a box camera, which I took some pictures of with. So in a way, we accumulate pictures by either trading them or taking them ourselves.
Wow, this is fascinating stuff. This is Richard Solomon with Milton Pike. We were talking about his personal experience in World War II. And when we come back, we're going to go through some of his photographs and some of the other archival material that he gathered all those years ago. We'll be right back. Keep it locked in. All right, welcome back, Richard Solomon. I'm with Milton Pike.
This is in Manila. This is in Manila. It's a famous cemetery where the Japanese were buried with all the mausoleums that they have. At this particular time, it's a restricted area. The Chinese people do. I said Japanese. I meant Chinese cemetery.
So it's a Chinese cemetery in the Philippines.
The Chinese cemetery in the Philippines, and that is a area that they don't allow you to go into anymore. You can see they're very, very lovely.
Very intricate.
Yes. And it's one of the places we used to visit because when we got time off, we run into Manila and go to all the interesting places. So these are different areas in the Philippines. This is a Wawa Dam where we used to go swimming. Very close. You had to take a jeep to go there. And it was a very, very lovely place that we'd stop at.
Okay. Are these like mountains?
Yeah, well, it's a dam.
Okay,
so
yeah.
It's part of the dam. I don't know which river was flowing into it. May have been the Pasig River.
Okay, and then we have other pictures here.
The other pictures.
Very scenic, very beautiful.
Yes.
And you took all these yourself? Mostly?
Mostly, a lot of these pictures were taken by myself.
Okay.
This was with a box camera or another camera that I had. I have to read all the information on here to know what I saw.
It says the trail to Wawa Dam.
The trail to Wawa Dam. This is the dam.
Yeah.
Like I say, that was an area that was very interesting. It was a nice trip. See, and this is Corregidor. Everybody knows about Corregidor. That was an area we went to, and it was completely destroyed. The whole tunnel was completely destroyed.
Why'd they call it the Rock?
Well, because if you were there, you find out that it was almost a concrete rock. The whole thing was concrete. This is a picture from...
This was what's left of the American Marine Barracks. Okay. And this was...
I have to read this over to remember what it is.
Okay. Well, we can keep going. There's all kinds of really cool stuff.
American Marine Barracks. And this is Fort Drum, which was another little piece next to Corregidor.
Okay. We're looking at photos that are really, really old. I mean, these are precious.
74 years old.
Yeah, they're 74 years old, and they certainly have, weathered some time.
But they're in good shape.
So it says, there's a pretty funny sign. It says, "Attention souvenir hunters. For a quick death, pick up ammunition on this island." So.
As a matter of fact, I had gone through some areas when I was driving through the Philippines where there was a skirmish, and and they cordoned off the whole area. No one was allowed to go in because they didn't want you to pick up anything because they were practically booby-trapped. So you stood out there, and of course the Filipino guys went up there and they stole everything they could off the fallen Japanese, and they were selling them on the road to us.
And this is there's a picture of a lighthouse. And what else we have here? You have
this is
work details.
Some of the Japanese that we captured, that we picked up. They were close to our battalion strength headquarters, and we marched them onto our
to your military base, yeah.
Military base, and they helped build a couple of things, put things together, like a movie theater and things like that.
Okay. Now, what are these?
This is more pictures of Corregidor.
Okay. Now, you were just a young man at the time, right? You were how old?
This is
about 20?
22 years old at that time. This is Cavite.
Is that
with the
rice field?
fields in Cavite. See.
Yeah, look, the land looks so pristine in some ways and very undeveloped.
These are outlying areas on Luzon that we went to. So I say it's Cavite.
No, rice fields everywhere.
Yeah. Not only rice field, but salt areas where they evaporated the seawater and got salt in. These are some of the homes. And this is some of the places we went swimming. Some of the beaches near Manila.
Wow, good. And then let's keep going. This is Baguio?
Baguio.
Baguio
is the northern part. It's very pristine. They have pine trees, and it's cool up there. It was a place to go for rest and recreation that we were allowed about once a month to go up there. It was about 4 or 5 hours from Manila.
Now, when you said you go up there once in a while, for how long of a period of time would they give you? Just 2 days or something like that?
Yeah, we would spend the weekend up there and hear the Igorot tribes people that lived up there in the mountains. And
what do we have here? These are, let's see, this is Jesuits Observatory and Camp John Hay.
Camp John Hay. Camp John Hay was up in Baguio, where actually MacArthur and Eisenhower visited up there one time after the war in Europe was over. I had seen them up there. They were up at the time I was there, but I haven't got any pictures of them.
Ah, but here's something. Camp John Hay.
In Baguio.
Camp John Hay, tour guide, Mountain Province. So let me just read the first part of this. It says, the following pages written in pictorial are designed primarily for the man or woman in uniform who comes to vacation in Baguio. You'll find, as others did decades ago, that the mountain plateau upon which you stand is reminiscent of a small corner of America. The smell of pine, the sweep of majestic mountains, the refreshing and stimulating air, and the roaring fireplaces are familiar and very welcome. It says here, prepared by the Public Relations Office of Camp John Hay, Lieutenant Oliver R. Cross and Staff Sergeant Sidney Reitman. So there you go. So that's a little booklet.
Little booklet that I put together of Camp John Hay.
Right. So that was one of your lithographic assignments, right?
Resort area.
Yeah. All right.
Baguio.
That's some more stuff.
Batangas is to the southern part of Brazil, which was a very beautiful vacation area also that I traveled down to. And very pretty, the people there, but a lot of these people were destroyed by the Japanese.
So these are all the local people.
Local people, sea netting.
Yeah, fishing nets.
Fishing boats that they use, they call them barcas. And these are all the same thing.
I actually see like old-fashioned horses and coral in the bay. It's quite amazing stuff. And what else we got?
So this is still Batangas, where you have the coral there and a very lovely seashore and very lovely tree. No, I haven't looked at this for years. I'm trying to remember where all these things were. Very pretty pictures.
Oh, they're very scenic, very scenic. It's hard to describe them, but...
The old churches that were all bombed out, the cockfights that they had there, which is a national pastime. The destruction of all the buildings.
Yeah, you can see how horrific the damage is.
Everything's leveled, like all the destruction you see today. Just shells of buildings.
It's amazing that anything actually stood up. Yeah, these are various buildings.
This is in Manila and the outside
provinces? Yeah. Okay. And what do we see here? These are, looks like more destruction.
Some of the houses stood up outside the city. The native homes that were made out of bamboo and houses stuff.
Yeah. And
in Manila.
Oh, that's downtown. That's a lot of destruction down there.
Right.
This is downtown Manila. Yeah, oh yeah.
You can see the buildings all caved. They're all completely destroyed. And one of our units, actually, we had no roof room in our battalion headquarters. They stayed in Malacanan Palace, and they slept on the floor in Malacanan Palace. See some of them moving some of the houses. This is the native beast of burden there.
Looks like a water buffalo or something.
It is a water buffalo.
Yeah, wow. Wow, I think if people to see this today, they'd be just amazed.
Yeah, these are the water buffalo. There's a very pretty girl that we had.
These are all local people, yeah. Wow, fascinating. Is that a banana tree?
Yes.
Wow. Wow. Oh, look at this. This is...
coconuts. And fortunately for us, every once in a while, the Filipinos used to bring in a truckload of coconut and drop it on our ground so we'd have some fresh fruit.
And there's some air power here.
Yeah. We were near what they call Nichols Field. We were only a couple of miles away. We were stationed, but we would pick up a plane at Nichols Field and fly to Clark. And from Clark, we would fly all over. At one time, I took a flight all the way to Lingayen, which was the second place that MacArthur had landed. And we slept on the beach at Lingayen and then went back home, back up to our headquarters. It's the inside of the church.
Well, some major devastation here.
Yeah, the whole town used to get together and help move a house. They all lifted up the house, moved it. So I haven't seen these pictures for, like I say, 74 years.
What kind of memories does it bring back? Good or bad, both?
Well, after the war is over, you try not to remember of the horrendous things that you saw. You only try and keep in your mind the good memories, the people you met, the places you went to. Otherwise, you'd never be able to live with yourself. That's it.
Now this looks like a different group of pictures. This is so you have an air show.
The air show. This was after they dropped the nuclear bomb, so we had the air show there.
It says liberation of the Philippines marked another day to the holidays of these people. Okay. Now, is that MacArthur? Is that MacArthur? Yeah, that's MacArthur, isn't he?
Right.
Wow. Now, did you take that, or was that?
He asked me if I took it. I don't even remember which pictures I took or which pictures.
Well, that's definitely a picture of General MacArthur right up like 3 feet away. Wow.
Well, we went to the rallies, so I was there. Because we all really wanted to get home. This is the other generals that were there. I guess this is the French general that was there.
And this is the newly elected president of the Philippines, this guy right here, Rojas?
Rojas,
yeah.
Yes.
Wow. Wow.
So this belongs someplace.
These are great pictures. These are great pictures. Let me get this one. Maybe this one goes over here.
Oh, one of these days
Yeah.
I'll put it all together.
Got to get a new album and put them all together.
Falling apart. This is some of the things that went in Manila when we went to some of the shows that they had there, or some of the gatherings we had there.
Wow.
These are the dresses that they wore.
And it says important families. So these must be people who were part of the local government level.
Yeah.
I assume the local people suffered terribly during the war.
I imagine they did, yes.
So we're looking at pictures. These are the pictures from the war crimes. Wow. Is that another picture of MacArthur?
Yeah.
Wow.
This is in Manila. These are some of the older pictures.
Right. And these are definitely...
Sorry I never got his signature. Here's MacArthur.
Yeah, and you can see these are court proceeding pictures. You can see just from the body language, interrogation of witnesses, yes. People standing, taking testimony. I mean, these are clearly the kind of things that you see at a trial. All right, so we're looking at a surrender pamphlet, flyer. It says in the different languages, but it says in English, to all persons in the Philippine Islands, these Japanese are surrendering to the American Army. You are ordered not to harm them. Bring the Japanese to the American soldiers or hold them, and notify the Americans who are located at the end of the railway approximately 30 miles south of Fabrica at the site of the lumber camp, by order of Commanding General U.S. Army Forces, Western Pacific. And this is what was dropped by leaflet.
Leaflets that we dropped on them. And this is in Japanese. It's written in Japanese, it's written in English, and it's written in Tagalog. This is Japanese money that was dumped. Just paper and ink. If you're in the printing industry, all this money is just paper and ink.
So the Japanese money was discarded. And then you printed up the new money.
New money, which was the American money with the word victory on the back of it. And somehow it's disappeared. The money, I had the copies of it. But that can be found around. If you go in the Philippines, some of the places probably have American money. I haven't looked at this for a long time.
Well, I want to thank you for your service. I know America is grateful for what you did. We would not be here for all of the people who served in the war along with you and made the sacrifice that they did, both in terms of some people, the ultimate sacrifice, and others, of course, their families and, putting their lives on hold, and for those who were injured and disabled. But this is incredible stuff. What do you think when you look at all this stuff now, all these years later, in 2017?
I can't remember. I only remember these places through the pictures I've seen. And I was to all these places while I was in the Philippines. Of course, we were very adventurous. We were young. We traveled by thumbing a ride. Any Jeep went by. If I had a weapons carrier that I had taken from my post to go, I would pick up anybody that was going in any direction that I was going in. And that's the way we got around.
That was a long time ago, but thank you for your time with me. And I think what we're going to do is we'll take some pictures of all this great stuff. But thank you again.